Hello, everyone, and welcome to Voceras. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about some of your stressors and what is going on today with multiple images that are circulating online and how those images or memes have in its root some historical context. So, I have an expert today with us, although we have a little bit of technical difficulties. But the most important thing is that you guys are here now with us. So we're going to have a conversation. I have with me Dr. Vaz. He is an expert in the African diaspora history. And I also have with me today my dear friend Angie, which she'll be commenting and also asking some questions with me. That way we can all learn not to be scared, but to know about history that this moment in time has repeated itself from before. So I want you to open your mind today, and I'm going to go ahead and welcome my guest. How are you?
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate everyone's time, and I have my dear friend Angie. You have seen Angie taking, and it matters. Everyone has a little bit to offer and to share. You have seen Angie did how many, like 6 weeks or 8 weeks of prayer for our immigrants, and
12 weeks.
12 weeks, even more time. Yes, prayer is always needed. At least for believers, we know that God can hear your prayers, and we just don't do it enough. So, without further ado, I have we're going to learn a lot today, and I'm going to go ahead and ask our first question, Dr. Vazio. We're going to call you Neil because
Yeah.
that's what you have. You have it. But for this purpose, and I have all my questions here because I have many. Tell us a little bit, and I mean, you have a very interesting background, and I tell you why, because I remember when I was in high school, and we learned about history. I only learned about the Civil War and that slavery existed, and that's it. All throughout high school, I didn't really learn a little bit more about slavery into college, but you literally had to like majored in like African studies, Black studies, and things like that to learn about this type of history. Although I truly believe that Black history is part of American history and it should be part of, the schools. Now, I want to show a few images that has been circulating online and has, people a little bit scared, that I want your comments on it and your background in history to tell us a little bit, um, about the imagery, and then, we'll enter into context in a few minutes. But with everything that is happening with immigration right now, that's like the big topic circulating, not only online, but all over the media every time I open my phone. And what I read the comments, and I'm sure you have encountered this too, is people being afraid. And looking at images like this, for example, using keywords like foreign invaders and reporting them to ICE and official government um, profiles, because you see here, that is an official government profile because it has the blue mark on the top,
Mhm.
and people can actually go and find this. So I am going to go ahead and let you take it over from here, and let's talk a little bit about this, because the whole point of this session and what I want everyone to leave with is, number one, we have been here before, and number two, not to be afraid.
Yes, absolutely. When I see that image, the first thing I think about is all of those lessons I learned about in school. The earlier part of American history, when John Adams was president in 1798, they passed what was known as the Alien and Sedition Acts. And they were doing that at a time when there were immigrants coming into this country, some of whom happened to be of French background. John Adams in the 1790s was pretty anti-French, and this was also during the French Revolution. The French Revolution, for anybody that doesn't know, it was a pretty chaotic revolution where they cut off the king's head, they sent people to the guillotines, and it was just a very bloody war going on in France. So there was a lot of rhetoric at the time uh, when the presidential election of 1800 was coming up about who's a real American, who's not a real American. If you don't support the Federalist Party, you're not a real American, yada, yada, yada. So everything that you see kind of tends to repeat itself. But the Alien and Sedition Acts was essentially saying the same things. If you were, if they were telling people to report other people that were in this country illegally, they we had what was known as the Naturalization Act of 1790, which you had to be here for just a few years in order to get citizenship or be recognized as a resident. They extended that under the Alien and Sedition Acts. They made it harder to get your citizenship with the Alien and Sedition Acts. They also started prosecuting individuals that were speaking out against the John Adams administration with the Alien and Sedition Acts. So this was a very draconian time, and this is what we learn about in school as like, hey, this goes against everything that they just fought for just 20 years earlier during the American
Hmm.
Revolutionary War, right?
Yeah.
The American Revolutionary War, they were upset about the redcoats of the British, the Parliament and the King, uh, not giving their just due under the laws, right? So that happened then. You see it happening again several times. And another big time when it happened in history was during the 19 teens and the 1920s. A few things were going on at the time. We had World War One. We had over there in Russia, there was a Russian Revolution, and there was actually a massive immigrant population coming into this country at the time, to the point where by 1915, 2/3 of all Americans were either foreign born or had at least one parent that was foreign born, and that was in the 19 teens, early 1920s. So it's not that much. And sometimes in my classes, I'll ask my students, how many of y'all are foreign born, or how many of y'all have at least one parent that's foreign born, and it's roughly around the same number. So they curtailed that immigration by the early 1920s with a number of laws they put in place. A lot of what they're doing now with immigration, they did in the 1920s tenfold, right?
Hmm.
And ICE raids, all that stuff. That's all that stuff has already happened. You had Palmer raids, is what they called them back then. They were
Hmm.
spying on German Americans. They were spying on people they suspected to be communists. They were spying on immigrants that were considered to be low grade immigrants. Many Southern Europeans, Eastern Europeans. The descendants of those people today are now the ones that are telling Latin American immigrants that they don't belong here. They don't deserve to be here. If you go back 100 years, people were saying the same thing to their ancestors. So
Hmm.
you just see the same thing continue to repeat itself. They put laws in the books too that targeted certain populations. In the 19 teens, during the Mexican Revolution, from 1910 to 1920, there was a lot of Mexicans that fled Mexico to come into the Southwest United States. They started putting anti-marijuana laws in the books, not because marijuana was inherently wrong. It's just that was something that the Mexicans used to do as a pastime, and they
Yeah.
even to stigmatize cannabis itself, they started referring to it as marijuana, which was a Mexican term. They never referred to it as marijuana in the United States until they wanted to stigmatize it against Mexican populations.
I think this is the image
Yeah.
that you are referring to.
Yes. Yeah.
Marijuana. Yeah.
Yeah. And they even made a movie uh, in 1936 called Reefer Madness. And then so when Reefer Madness came out, they depicted marijuana as being like the most like chaotic drug that anybody can ever take. It's caused people to rape women. It caused people to drive out of control. It caused people to commit crimes. Caused all these kinds of things. And then everybody started to believe it. before, like 10, 15 years before this, when the Mexicans first started coming in large numbers, it was a state by state case started making it illegal, marijuana illegal. So like 29 states by 1920, I think it was, made marijuana illegal. But then after Reefer Madness came out in 1936, the 1937 is when they passed the Marijuana Tax Act. And the Marijuana
Mhm.
Tax Act made marijuana virtually illegal. The only way you can get access to marijuana is if it was used for industrial or medicinal purposes. But even that was very hard to get the paperwork to get
Mhm.
access to that. And then by 1970, they made it completely illegal. You couldn't even use it for medicinal nor industrial purposes when Richard Nixon became president.
Interesting. So the making marijuana illegal was more of like a political
Yeah,
stance more than, because even today, like it took everyone a while to accept marijuana to be used as medicine. And also in the
yeah,
islands, they're heavily used. So I never heard of anyone die statistically from marijuana. Many
yeah,
more die a year from smoking cigarettes than
yeah.
it does marijuana. But we have another image as well that has been circulating, and it's crazy because you have, as you see in social media, was something that we didn't have before. So information spreads like wildfire, especially when it comes from like an official account. And you see here, that within hours it had like over 61,000 likes, 41,000 shares, um, depicting immigrants in a different light. I know that we have a few images to share that that have some historical context as well. So, what are your takes in regards to the next image portrayed?
Well, I think that's the first time I've ever seen that. But that one, it looks like your typical propaganda,
That's from the
obviously,
White
right?
House, by the
It's
way.
Yeah, and that's I noticed that, and I was like, sheesh, this guy doesn't care. But yeah, it's coming directly from the White House. But is that supposed to be Donald
That
Trump?
is like a ICE agent. Yeah, an ICE
An ICE
agent. Yeah.
agent? Okay, so that's an ICE agent. So what you find in a lot with propaganda as well is they'll make the person that's supposed to look like the good guy look well kept, in shape, all those kinds of things, and they'll make the person that's supposed to be the bad guy look somewhat grotesque, maybe overweight, maybe shorter than the person that's detaining them, and it's all done because naturally speaking, we have images in our head of what it what it seems like to be an ideal person. They used to do this with a lot of slavery images as well. They would show like the masters as tall and lean and strong and intrepid, and then they would show the enslaved as like meek and hunched over and short and stocky, and it was all to kind of show that kind of dominance. That image to me kind of portrays that same thing, and it dehumanizes people.
Mhm.
You say, "Oh, these people aren't worthy anyway," and
I
so
I have
it,
seen like in the past as well, where it was like there was even fake science, that
yeah,
Africans were inferior and that they looked a certain way. Like even this image right here, where they're portrayed with the big lips and almost like
yeah,
indigenous, not
yeah,
industrialized. Um,
yeah,
and then you have the depictions of being, you know, uh, ignorant, and that is a
yeah,
burden for for the white man.
yeah,
I truly believe that this whole situation, to be honest with you, it goes back to race. Like at the end of the day, like I think that if America doesn't heal from the atrocities of slavery, like we're always going to be repeating the same thing over and over again,
Yeah.
because they did it with the many different groups, like the Irish, and correct me, because this is, I'm going back to my archives from a long time ago. They did it with
You're right.
the Mexicans at one point of time, where
Yep.
they
Yep.
accidentally deported like 60% of citizens in their raids, and that
Hmm.
wasn't that long ago either. It's like the Operation Wetback or something like that.
Wetback. Yeah. Under Dwight D. Eisenhower administration. Yeah.
Yes,
That's like that's 60 something, 70
it
years ago.
it's
Like
not
60
that
years ago.
long ago that happened, but
No, it's not.
because it's not taught in school, no
Yeah.
one knows
No one
about
knows
it.
about it. Oh, yeah. No one knows about it. That yeah, the other image that you just showed was it's known as the white man's burden, and that was America and Britain justifying imperialism of other nations. So the one that's Uncle Sam there in the back with the red striped pants, and that's supposed to be Britain in the front with the
Hmm.
red coat. In the back, that's Uncle Sam carrying Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam on his
Hmm.
back. Those caricatures there are supposed to represent the people of
Hmm.
those islands, uh, carrying them out of savagery, ignorance, oppression, vice, superstition, cannibalism, and then carrying. If you look at the other part of the image, they're carrying them into civilization, golden civilization at the
Hmm.
top. Britain's doing the same thing. They're also imperialists. Britain's carrying China, India, Egypt, and different nations from their savagery all the way into civilization.
Hmm.
And it's this notion that these people are don't know how to rule themselves. They don't know how to govern themselves. They don't know how to take care of themselves. So we have to go in there.
Hmm.
This is what they're thinking.
Hmm.
We have to go in there and make sure that we carry them into civilization.
Hmm.
If
Hmm.
we don't, they're just going to be a waste. They're going to be
Oh,
human waste. And this is the propaganda that they pass. This is what justifies going into Africa and colonizing. This is what justifies going into Asia and colonizing. And this is what justifies the United States had their own form of neo-colonization or pseudo-colonization, known as imperialism, or also known as the Monroe Doctrine.
mm,
And that's basically U.S. corporations going all throughout Latin America saying they have the right to rule over Latin American countries, which is also part of the main reason why so many Latin American countries flee to the United States, because our own countries and our own corporations has caused those other nations to become in economic turmoil to the point where, you know, their governments are essentially owned and operated by U.S.
yeah.
politicians.
Go ahead, Angie.
About sorry, I just wanted to chime in because I was thinking about this, and anyway, going back to the first picture, with the whole, it was the picture with marijuana, right? One of the things that I think there's a parallel there when we look at, the depiction, like the evilizing, how, there's a sense of like the use of almost like faith and religion in a way to get people on board, right? In this particular situation with uh, igniting hate and dislike toward a particular race. And I feel like that is something that we are seeing um, again, because I think initially the intentions are portrayed, the intentions of why we are to create such a division is meant, is done in a way that it almost feels like there's a reason to protect, right? To exercise protection over, um, American citizens, let's say. And if when I'm thinking about just some of the recent things that have transpired, initially the whole campaign of, you know, um, of going after illegal immigrants sounded like a logical idea, right? Going after the people that were committing crimes, and we've noticed that there's been a shift in that process, because all of a sudden we went from, these very evil crimes to now all of a sudden, well, everyone that's here illegally is a criminal and deserving of, being deported or being sent to a foreign country or what. So I guess my question is, for Dr. Vaz, is where, I mean, obviously there's that observation from what we've seen, but is that kind of like what has transpired in history? Because you have to get a large group of people in, like, to actively participate, and there's like two people can't carry a full campaign like that. You have to get
Yeah,
people to, um so is that,
that's exactly, yeah, that's exactly how it works. There's a quote in the Holocaust Museum, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it says, "First they came for the handicap, and I wasn't handicapped, so I said nothing. Then they came for the religious minority, and I wasn't a religious minority, so I said nothing. Then they came for the foreigner, and I wasn't a foreigner, so I said nothing. And then, by the time they came after me, there was no one else to stand up for me." And that's essentially what happens all throughout. Whenever you see an authoritarian government take over people and take away all of their rights, they chip away at people's rights at first. And at first, they're taking away the rights of the other people, right? Let's take away those other people's rights. And then you have the vast majority of people on board with it because they say, well, I'm not them, so who cares, right? So when they said take away the rights of illegal immigrants, most of us said, well, they shouldn't have been here in the first place because they're illegal. But they still have rights under the Constitution in this country, technically speaking. If you want to go by the Constitution, when you're within these borders, you have constitutional rights, right? So, but then it's kind of like the same thing happens with prisoners. When people get locked up and go to jail, we forget about them. When they get out, when they're on parole, we forget about them. They have no right to vote. They can't get an apartment. They can't get a job. We dismiss those people as, well, you made a bad decision, so therefore. But you can't measure a society on the ones that have. You got to measure a society that on the least, on the lowly, on the one that's considered at the bottom of that society. Then that's a true measure of how a society takes care of their people, not based on how you take care of the upper echelons, but how you take care of the least of that society, the
Well,
minority in
you
that
have
society.
people being confused because it's shocking to know that a lot of Americans, like, and I see this all the time on social media, they don't really know the Constitution. Like, they truly believe that the Constitution only protects citizens, and it's not true. And I had a lawyer explain this to them like a few weeks ago, and I had a constitutional
Yeah,
lawyer explain it again. But it's like,
yeah. Well, they don't teach the Constitution in school that much either,
true,
you know.
true, true.
So
In civics, in civics classes, you know what I learned? And this is public school in Massachusetts. I just learned um, the name of all the presidents, the date when they led, and the name of all of the states, and then that's it.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, you memorize some
Memorized.
some very important
Yeah,
facts.
but
Yeah,
it wasn't like, oh, uh, they didn't teach us the amendments. I am memorizing my 27 amendments right now. I have 5 copies of the Constitution, and I carry a copy of that in my car. I have equipped myself with everything. I have a camera in my car. I have a copy of the Constitution in my
right,
car. I have a copy of my a little card of my passport that I use when I travel, but I use it here. And what I just tell people, just equip yourself. We're here in this moment in time, and we have to be courageous and speak out in front of injustice, no matter what, people think. And today I was sharing the images that I share with you, Dr. Neil, on Facebook. I wish I had a screenshot, but I'm gonna keep the privacy of the person. I don't want any of my followers to go find the person and put hate comments. So I'm just gonna tell you,
I
that I showed this image, you know, and they said that it was that I was lying, that it was fake, and they all were hounding me because so I want to ask you, what happens historically, right, when the press and just the general public normalizes this around the leader, and we see around, president or any leader, we see "Long live the king" imagery right here of Trump with a crown, and this is a real image, as you can see. It was
yeah.
posted from the official White House, and my argument was, and this was posted a few, like 1 month ago, but my argument with the group was, would you be okay if, you know the Biden administration did this? How would you react? And the response of this person was, everything that you're posting here is fake. So they're having like a cognitive dissonance crash out.
Yeah. And I personally try not to even engage with those kinds of people because, especially online, like Facebook is like a cesspool of just the
Willful
worst kinds
ignorance,
of,
because
yeah,
we have in our fingertips information. And I said, and I gave this person instructions: do a reverse image search, go into the page, look, you can click on images, click on it, and it's there. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
sometimes uninvited, they come into my profile to just give me some shade and some hate. But I try to be as polite as possible, but I am stern, direct, try to be respectful. Some
Yeah.
people I know personally, so, and then they're older than me, so I try to be respectful. um I have been called out to use all caps because sometimes you get stressed out. I'm like, please, just leave me alone.
Right.
But what would you say in general? That people, claim this to just be like law enforcement, patriotism. How can we confront this without sounding partisan, but to be a better informed populace? You know what I mean? And hold
Um,
politicians in general accountable.
so what I do personally is I try to stay away from certain trigger words, I guess, whenever we're talking about these kinds of things. So, and like in class, I got to be very diplomatic, right? So there's certain things I learned this before Ron DeSantis was even in office, and they were telling us not to say certain words. I
Oh
already was
yes,
doing this.
because, oh my gosh, yes, because you're under
Yeah.
a lot of restrictions. Okay, yes,
Yeah, I'm under a
yes.
lot of restrictions, so I'm not supposed to. They don't want you to say certain things anymore
Okay.
and all that stuff. I don't really care. Because I already do this in life in general. Because if you're trying to reach across the aisle to reach somebody, sometimes you got to meet people where they are, right? So if the first thing I do is come to them saying a trigger word that I know that will immediately turn them off, then I've lost them already. And if the goal is to get more people to be understanding and to be on your side, you got to identify certain trigger words that you know you can't use around these people. Because if you do, that would that might provoke them or alienate them or make them turn the other way. So I guess an example of this is I in class I don't, and even amongst a lot of people I don't hardly ever use the word racist.
Mhm.
And you're probably like, why don't you use the word racist? If people are racist, call them
Yes.
racist. But you got to understand something. That word has become so hackneyed to the point where it's an automatic turnoff to people. They as soon as you use that word, they're already boxing you into a category. You become the other to them. You become the enemy to them. You become somebody that they don't even want to reason with, right? So don't use the word racist. All right, but I can use probably 15 other words to describe somebody that's just as bad as a racist without using the word racist to get the person to understand what I'm saying about that person. You understand what I'm
Mhm.
saying? But the racist word is the trigger word that would turn them
Mhm.
off. But there's so many other words I could use. Well, or I could just describe what they did. You know, right? This person did this against this person in history. He did this to this person. He robbed them. He stole from them. He raped
Mm.
them. He this. He this. He this. He this. That. Why did he do that? I don't know. I guess he just didn't like them. Why did he not like them? I don't know. Maybe had something to do with they considered them the other. You know, I'm dancing around the word, but getting the person to eventually warm up and open up, and then eventually I might be able to use the word. Yeah, that's something that we call racist. All right,
Oh boy,
but
but
it's
yeah.
a very delicate way, and that's just one example. There's so many other examples of there's so many other trigger words out there that the both sides have. Right, so
But
the so-called
sometimes you and racist, it is a heavy word, but you have to like differentiate like when you're being prejudiced, and I think that there's a confusion there with some people when you're being prejudiced versus a racist. A racist, they truly believe that white is the superior race, like the white supremacists, and they are vocal, about it, and
yes,
through their actions.
but they
Go ahead.
sorry to interrupt.
No, no, no.
Go ahead.
I'm learning
Go
from
ahead.
you, and we're learning from you. So you better spill the beans.
No, so but if you notice when you call that's sometimes the white people that are called racist, they are more offended than the one that was called the racial slur. You ever see white people get all bent out of shape by being called a racist? So they don't, in their mind, somehow, some way, they don't. A lot of them don't think that they're racist
Mhm.
because they've been taught at some point in their life that being a racist is the worst thing that you can be. But they have all the characteristics of a
Mhm.
racist person. However, they have that cognitive dissonance in their heads without really
Yes, which
squaring it.
that
I don't know
never
how.
happened to me, and seeing it in front of my eyes, I was like, yes.
Yeah, but it's a reality. So there's people right now on my Facebook that they say the most racist things on Facebook because they're part of that. They're part of the MAGA Trump team, and they're getting more and more extreme. But when I see them in person, they're not that person that they are
Well,
on
it's
Facebook.
easy to hide behind the phone and the computer,
Yeah, but we're all
but
guilty of that. And we all have to be. I think one of the things we all have to be understanding.
when you say white people, let me tell you something. I was disowned by my mother for marrying black. My Because you see, in Dominican Republic, there's also a racial situation with the Haitians. I'm
You're
from
from the Dominican.
Dominican Republic.
Yeah,
So over there, there's a lot of racial divide, and when you grow up, them telling you you have to marry and polish the race, marry white. You cannot go backwards.
blancamiento,
Yes,
blancamiento.
you cannot go backwards and marry black. So I
Yeah,
was confronted with the decision of marrying the husband that I love, that is black. I have two beautiful mixed children. that are Black, Hispanic, and Italian, or staying with my family and be with my mom. I haven't seen my mom in 10 years. She does not know my children. Okay.
Wow.
Um, because what I did was not something that I was supposed to do. Although my aunts were the ones that started marrying black as a being a rebel, because my as a
Yeah, the
rebellion,
rebellion.
because my family line come from the my last name is Melo, from the Canary Islands, Spain.
Oh
My
yeah,
family line were the racists and Dominican Republic. My
yeah,
grandfather was a we called him Papa Blanco. Blanco in Spanish is white. Papa white because he had
yeah,
also had green eyes. And the new generation trying to break from that, and until this day we have like this conflict with the Haitians also.
yeah,
And this like is almost like a self-hate, because you
yeah,
have all these beautiful black women wearing wigs, you
yeah.
know, that they cannot afford. They rather pay for the wig than pay
Mm.
for their rent. These wigs,
Yeah,
mind you, in Dominican Republic, the average salary is between 300 $300 a month. You are paid well
mm.
if you paid $500 a month. These wigs are
Wow.
between 500 and $800. So they rather get the wigs than pay their rent. And it
Yeah,
doesn't make any
yeah,
sense. And I sit here breaking that generational curse. And although I've been here since I was a child, I remember these things, you know, and uh, seeing this like kind of play out and come back, and having, like our own people being against their own, it's really hard
yeah,
to see and accept. Because let me tell you, 50% of Hispanics voted for Trump, you know?
yeah,
And that is a very hard pill to swallow when you are seeing, people trying to do it right, going to their immigration hearing and being snatched.
yeah,
People complaining in South Florida that they don't, they have to close their restaurant because people are not showing up to work.
mm.
They're not, eating their tacos or whatever,
Yeah,
or going to their Cuban restaurant that they love. And we have the farms also in Texas and empty,
yeah,
all of those fruits and vegetables rotting. It's gonna gradually take time for us to see the full effects of this, but it's coming.
yeah,
Like, so I have children, small children. How What can we do, to mold our children in this moment in time, in a way that makes sense? Because my kid, when he goes to the YMCA, he had, and whatever, he comes back, he talks to his friends and whatever, and he is the one that talks about Trump, and I'm like, stop saying those things, and try to have him not being involved, but even children are being involved.
yeah.
You saw that there was a protest in Roblox. You heard of all the children? Yeah, the kids were having a protest in Roblox. They're kind of like 8 to 10 years old, being politically involved. But how do you like reconcile that? Especially you that are teaching the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, I like I was saying, I think you got to be diplomatic about it. That's what I've come to that conclusion. Find out what you have in common, and at the end of the day, the people that are the extreme right wingers, you have something in common with them,
You
right?
think so?
And the people that are
Although
extreme,
they want to kill you.
no, no, because a lot of it is, honestly, a lot of it is online. In my everyday life, I always say this, like when because I got off social media for 7 years at one time. And I remember that everybody was angry at each other for all these reasons, and I could never figure out why. And then I logged into my Facebook after 7 years, and then I understood. I was like, wow, people that were best friends in high school were all of a sudden beefing with each other on Facebook about some people that don't care anything about them, and that people that they would never ever meet in their lives, right? And
Yeah.
so I try to the way I go about it, I try to be as diplomatic as possible. I say, okay, both political parties are a bunch of crooks, right? Both political parties have found a way to take away our freedoms in different ways, right? Now, the so-called right wingers, all they want to do is point out how the left wing takes away freedoms and does this and does that and does that. But in the left wing, you have to be honest about it. The left wing does the same thing to the right wing and points out all the times that the right wing tries to take away freedoms, all that type of stuff. So every 4 years or 8 years, whenever we switch a president, we'll have half the country supporting stripping away our rights and the other half of the country against it. And then another 4 years later, you'll have the other half of the country supporting stripping away our rights and the other half of the country against it. And instead of having 100% of the people against the stripping of our rights all the time, they were brilliantly figured out a way to create a two-party system to where they have 50% of the population fighting the other 50% of the population that is trying to keep our rights, with this 50% of the population trying to take our rights away. And then 4 years later, it just flips. And it's just like it's a game, and it's an ongoing game, and this is why every year, if you think about it, we've had more and more rights stripped away as time has gone on, rather than rights given,
Mhm.
right? They'll pass the Alien and Sedition Act, then they pass the Patriot Act, then they pass the War on Drugs, and then they pass the this and they pass the that, and then and there's just less and less rights that we all have, because every 4 or 8 years, when we get a new administration, when we get a new Congress, they just keep taking away rights, and we don't we're not cognizant enough to say, hey, wait a second. 4 years ago, I was against them taking these rights away. Now I'm for it. Or 4 years ago, I was against them invading a foreign country. Now I'm for it. And this is, and we just support things just because our team supports it, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And this is what the problem is. Like we're not critically thinking about it. We're just so emotional about the side or the team that we're on. So to me, what I do is I try to take my emotions out of it, right? And I try to say, okay, you know what? You're right. You got that one. This is wrong that the Democrats did. This is wrong that the Republicans did. This is wrong, and then this is right. And when you can have those like honest conversations, I think that people would be more understanding.
Yeah, and I think you can see that in the numbers. There was like a poll being made, and people can find this online, where there's a decrease of support on both parties. Like people are they're feeling discontentment.
Yeah, and, and it always happens after the election. After every election, like sometime in the what they call the midterms, right? When you're approaching the midterms, everybody's kind of like, I hate both parties. But the propaganda starts building up again once you get right before the election season, right before the 4 year election season, 2016, 2020, 2024. Now it's going to be 2028. Right before the election season, people drift right back to their teams again, because the propaganda is working in full force on both sides.
And you see like a little shift. I call it little because it just happened in New York with the with Mandani, Mamdani. Ran for the mayoral race against Cuomo, and I see a new generation, like, and and like you said, there's more similarities because, to my understanding, the people that voted for Trump were voting against the establishment,
Yeah,
and all these things, and it happened in the same way, in the same form in New York, where people, Cuomo is a Democrat,
yeah,
but when people saw that he was part of the his campaign money was coming from the Clintons, they
exactly.
drastically voted for
Yeah,
him.
exactly.
So you're seeing like people, although we don't see it as much, but with little things like that, like you have this sense of like hope that people kind of getting it,
Yeah,
especially the new generation, that they want something drastically different
yeah,
from what has been happening
yeah.
forever. I had a conversation with Angie before we were here, and I was telling her that this is a American problem because we had, for example, Clinton, when he passed those laws that incarcerated black men in the masses, and then um, we had Biden when he was a senator that voted for busing. So I mean,
Yeah.
this is. I think that the pain of racism, if it's not, um, if you don't put it in the forefront, and we kind of like collectively as Americans go through that pain and recognize that that's something that is happening, that is real, that it keeps repeating, and the reason why it keeps repeating itself is because you put it like in the drawer and put it away,
Yeah,
and you don't want to see it. Like it's not like Germany that they confronted it and they're able to heal,
yeah,
from that.
yeah,
I mean, chattel slavery was like the most horrendous type of slavery in the world.
yeah, yeah.
So I mean, what are your takes on that? Like how can we move forward, as mothers, educators? I mean, you're in a tough position because you can only speak to your students about certain things. Um, how can we move forward from this, because this is a historical moment and it's going to be in the history books too. It's hard to process it and live it and be afraid, but how can we move forward from even what happened in history? How did people from back in the day, let's say that way, moved forward, and how can we do that today?
But I think you're doing the right thing right now. You know, as a mother, and because I know yeah, you must be teaching your kids all of these things, right?
Yes, I took him to the library for a library card
Yeah,
to read him stories, black and brown stories.
yeah. So
Mhm.
you're already doing it, and I think it starts at home, right? Everything starts right in the comfort of your own home. What you do, the conversations that you have with your children, conversations that you have with your family, and then doing stuff like this, having these panels where you can express and invite people on and educate people. I think the change comes from the bottom up, in my opinion. It doesn't come from the top down. So everything that you're doing right now is what you're supposed to be doing to get to go in the right direction. So I don't really. Sometimes the people that are quote unquote in power, they they feign power, right? And what I mean by that is they'll actually hype up their power, exaggerate the power, more power than they actually really have,
Mhm,
because
mhm.
they have control over the media, because they have the control over the airways and these kinds of things. They
Yeah.
might make other people feel insecure and powerless by painting the history a certain way. History is painted a certain way by design. As you start to study history, you realize there's a lot of success stories of people overcoming people triumphing, people going, conquering in a way that you would never imagine had you not have known these little unheard of histories that are in like these small pockets and these small enclaves of society. But when the narrative is told, the narrative is taught, and it's put in the public, the powers that be are the ones that have control over public history. So they put something at us, and you would think that, oh, okay, well then everything must have been horrific in the year 1870, and we're making linear progress. But I don't see history as one of linear progress. I see it as ebbs and flows, ups and downs, like a tug of war, right?
Yeah.
So, and if you start to view it like that, you start to see that you might actually have a chance to change things. If you see it as something that is just inevitable and you have no agency, then you would think that these people that are in, quote unquote in power have more power than they actually have. But the narrative that they paint is a narrative to make you think that you are powerless and they are the all powerful.
And go ahead, Angie.
Oh, I had a quick question, I guess, and I get that obviously there's no crystal ball, right? But in contrast to previous similar historical cycles, do you think that social media, because of social media, we have the opportunity to maybe make a quicker shift, away from some of these things that are creating, so much division, and I get that that's always been existent, but do you think that, or do you think that the opposite, we're kind of on the opposite end because of social, like what role do you think social media will play as to how we kind of recover from, as Annabelle mentioned, this moment in
I think
time?
that's a good question. I think social media is like it's like any other tool, right? So if I first purchase a tool or first purchase a handgun or something like that, I might shoot myself because I don't know how to use it properly. I think we're in the beginning phases of social media in society, so we don't know how to use it, and they're using it against us, the so-called powers that be, and so they're causing division. But I think once we realize it's to our detriment and not to our benefit, I think that the people are going to start realizing how to use this tool, and they're going to start learning and start teaching others how to use the tool, just like we're doing right here on this panel. That's one of
Yeah,
the things we're talking about, and I think down the line it's going to be used to our advantage. But I think right now
yeah.
it's being used to our detriment because it's
And I
all brand
think
new to us.
I think one of the things that you mentioned earlier is really key. And I think we really have to take that to heart. And that is looking for the common ground, right? Because I feel like we, regardless of where you stand in your opinion, your political views and opinion, we always try to gravitate toward, you know, what we view as right or wrong, which I'm not saying that we shouldn't identify the things that are, affecting other humans, but I feel like we miss the opportunity to really kind of find that common ground and engage with people, because at the end of the day, change happens because we are able to come together, versus I think continuing that separation or that division. I mean, that's just my opinion. So
Yeah, absolutely. I had to charge my phone. I just realized it was about to die.
I have a few more images before we have to go. But as far as you mentioning that you're a little bit restricted with the words that you can use in your classroom, do you think that in a way that's like indoctrination?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But me personally, I don't restrict myself.
Mm.
But I've always limited myself because I've chosen to limit myself. I don't let anybody else dictate that. Well, what I do, however, is I don't put certain things in my syllabus because I know that the state that you have to submit our syllabus 45 days in advance. We used to do it this day before class started. Now we have to do it 45 days in advance so the state can check it and see if it has anything that's like considered to be too woke. They
Mhm.
canceled my African American history class, but at the end of the day, I'm just going to teach my African American history class in my American history class. So to me, like, unless you're gonna like put me in handcuffs and like say you can't say this, I'm gonna do it anyway.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, I'm not gonna like cry over spilt milk. Like we have to. And one of the things I studied in graduate school was about Maroon history. Right now, Maroon history was the history of runaway slaves establishing their own communities. They existed everywhere in the Americas. Anywhere there was colonial slavery, there were Maroons. They called them cimarron in Spanish countries. They called them palenques in other Spanish countries. They called them quilombos in Brazil. They called them Seminoles in Florida. And they called them Maroons in the British West Indies. But at the end of the day, these people said, I don't care what your laws are. I don't care what your rules are. I'm going to assert my own freedom. I'm going to run away. I'm going to establish my own community, and I'm going to defend that community by any means necessary. And these are the communities that the unheard of communities that existed for hundreds of years and that still exist until this day. You
Yeah.
can they outlived slavery itself. And the point I'm trying to make is that they didn't wait on anybody to make any laws for them to liberate them. They didn't wait on anybody to make any rules for them to assert their own freedom. So when I because there's always going to be that enemy element that's going to do things against what you agree with. So when they say you can't teach African American history, the class now is canceled. But I still have a voice to go
Yes.
in front of my U.S. history class and say the same exact thing I said in my African American history class, but to
Yes.
now say it to my U.S. students.
American history needs to have a
Yeah.
black history.
At
Like
the end of at the
how
end,
can it
yeah,
exist without it?
yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
this weaponization of woke, like, is incredible. Like, I have really never seen it in my lifetime except for now, because the literal definition of woke is not how it's used today. It's literally weaponized
Yeah,
politically.
crazy.
um and tell us a little bit about that historically, so people will understand that it's not what they think it is.
I heard that it came from an old, I think it was an old blues song or something like that from way back in the day, and they used the word woke. But that's how African Americans used to talk when they used someone used to say, "Oh, he's woke." I mean,
Yeah.
he was privy to information, like he had knowledge,
Yeah.
he was enlightened, he knew things,
Yes.
right? I don't know what they're saying now, what it means now, but that's
Uh,
it.
I was,
You're awake.
yeah, that was, I was confused on how it was used in a negative light, because the way that we come to understand, woke is to be aware of social justice, and racial prejudice and things like that. I mean, that's how
Yeah.
I learned it to be.
Yep. Well,
But now it's like the definition of the evolution of that word is becoming negative.
yeah. Well, it's if the wolf uh has some desire for the sheep, he's not they're not going to have the same form the same conclusions about you know the society around them, right? The wolf wants to eat the sheep. The sheep is not going to agree with the wolf, and the wolf is not going to agree with the sheep. So anybody that's saying that you're wrong for being enlightened, you guys aren't on the same team and don't have the same goals, right? uh that doesn't mean those people can never be on your team, but it just means that where they are at that moment is they don't want to see certain people succeed. They don't want to see certain people rise up. They don't want to see certain people in positions of power. And so,
So I have a few images here that I want you to tell me a little bit about them, and then we're going to close into telling the public not to fear what we're going through today. So this is tell me a little bit about this image that was shared. Um,
Yeah, this is like the Negro takeover. So what was happening in 1898, were a couple of things were happening. In North Carolina, there was a well, first of all, when you go all the way back to after the Civil War, 1865, slavery is over, the Reconstruction comes in. From 1867 to like 1877, you had black governments that had been established all throughout the South. Well, by 1877, it was a compromise from two presidential candidates decided to compromise, and one of them conceded, gave the other one the election. And then Rutherford B. Hayes essentially ended Reconstruction. And so from 1878 all the way to about 1890 something, they started chipping away at black people's rights all throughout the South. The one state that still was voting for black people beyond the other states was North Carolina. Wilmington, North Carolina in 1898 had voted in an all black government in that city. And a lot of the whites in the neighboring cities and even Wilmington itself didn't like it. So they actually led a coup d'etat. They overthrew the government that was elected, the white people. They overthrew the black government that was elected in Wilmington, North Carolina. But that happened at the same exact time that there was a Cuban revolution going on from 1895 to 1898. It was the Cuban people rising up against the Spanish. The Spanish had colonized Cuba since the 1500s, and now the Cuban people had enough. But the thing about the Cuban Revolution was this: the Cubans that were revolting were not just white Cubans, but they were black Cubans fighting together in unison against the white Spaniards that had controlled their nation. And they were winning. They were well on their, by 1898, they're well on their way to winning the war. But our government realized that there's too many black people in that country to have that country become an independent black nation. Remember, in 1898, there are no black countries in the world. All countries with black people are colonized by Europeans. The only countries that had black people that were run by black people were Liberia, Ethiopia, and Haiti. And Haiti was demonized by the United States at the time. And in Ethiopia, they were trying to conquer, the Italians were trying to conquer them since forever. And Liberia was just a product of the United States, ex-slaves moving over there into West Africa. So Cuba would have been a black independent country had the United States not step in. Now you know what made the United States step in? The USS Maine ship that was there, the USS Maine, an American ship, exploded, and they blamed it on the Spanish. So this gave the United States the incentive or the reason, the justification to get involved in the war on behalf of the Cubans. But as soon as Teddy Roosevelt came in there and the Americans came in and they segregated the military, they demoted all black officers, and they made Cuba nothing but a island version of the Deep South. They segregated the country. And so that was the Cuba that you had from 1898 all the way to 1959 when Fidel Castro took over. But it was essentially that racist kind of American kind of, and we had something called yellow journalism at the time where the media really sensationalized certain things. They depicted the Cubans that were rising up as like unable to govern, just like those images that you see, those images that you saw with the white men's bird and all that stuff. That's from 1898 to 1900. Those images came at that same time. So it was all about painting black people and brown people as unable to govern, unable to rule, and those kinds of things. So this whole notion of black people coming in to rule, Negro rule, was considered like the scariest thing ever. It was like a horror movie, and it was happening in North Carolina, and it was also happening in Cuba, and they had to put a stop to it. And when Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders went in there to Cuba, they put a stop to that black rule that was about to take place in that island country.
They have the demonization also of just blackness in general.
Yeah.
And you had also black slaves not given the right to read, and also a different type of Bible. Let me tell you,
Yeah.
it took me 1 year to read the Bible cover to cover. And in one of the pages, it says, if you have a slave that you took, let's say you conquered a place and there were displaced people and you took them, as a quote unquote slave or servant, you have to let them go after 7 years.
Yeah.
That is what it says. But it was not. It was not in the. They only focus on the section that says that you have to obey
Yeah.
your
Obey your
master.
master. Yeah.
And I saw the Harriet Tubman on Hulu the other on Juneteenth.
Oh yeah.
It was great, and there was a scene there where they had a pastor preaching the same exact passage, Bible passage, that you have to obey your master.
Yep. Yep. They took out of the Bible that were all about like Exodus, like let my people go, and Moses, and like they took out all that stuff, but they
Eh,
keep in all the parts about
yeah, but
keeping them
see,
obedient.
also what's going on today is like the mix
Wait, I
of
don't hear you.
uh, what.
Hold
Can you
on a
hear me
second.
now?
Something happened to my phone. My wife just called me, and she knows I'm in here in
Uh,
this meeting. That's why
sorry, can you
why
hear
she
me
called
now?
me.
Are you able
So
to hear?
that messed up my
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
the audio.
Uh oh. I had one. Let me see if I can call you from here. But one of the questions that I had was,
All right, you hear me?
eh, yes, I can hear you. Can you hear
Yeah.
me? Okay. One of the questions that I had is this the and I guess we can close with this one. The mix of politics and your faith, that some people intertwine, both of them, and no matter what that party does or politician does is justified. And we see it, not only here, but also with the situation in Israel, which was a state founded in 1948.
Yeah.
And it historically, it doesn't have anything to do with the original people of the Bible
Yeah.
that they were called Israel. So you have, uh, you know, it's very difficult to try to explain, to someone that a sound doctrine is of love and kindness and not genocide and killing and calling eyes on your neighbor. Um, that's something that how have we seen this play out from history that is repeating again in the historical context with religion and
Yo,
politics?
something I used to do. I still do this in class. That it's like it's called the Socratic method, and you ask somebody a series of questions to see what they really think about something, even though you know the position that they would probably take on your final question that you have coming, but you want to get to see like where where they're gonna go, right? Let me an example. One time I went downtown with a camera and I was asking people. I said, "Who would you rather, Martin Luther King or Malcolm X?" And I was asking a lot of white conservative-looking men, and all these white men said, "Oh, I would. I'm a Martin Luther King kind of guy. I believe in peace. Yada 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 yada." So then I asked, "All right, um, so do you support the war in Iraq or no?" And this was like almost 20 years ago. And
Mhm.
there were those same people that said they were all for peace. They said, "Well, yeah, I support the war in Iraq." And I said, "Wait a second. You just told me that you're more for peace. What how do you square that?" And a lot of people, they stop and they say, oh, and then it gets them to think beyond what they were ever willing to think before. Because most people are superficial thinkers. They
Mm-hmm.
join a team and that's it. And if you can get more people to do that, I think that's the most brilliant way about going about opening up people's minds. I did the same thing in class. My U.S. history class, not the one you were in, Angie, but the one from colonial times to 1865. I would ask the students about the American Revolution. How many of y'all students would support the American Revolution? The American Revolution is a bunch of people rising up against their governments violently to take it over and create a new nation. Bunch of students support it. How many of y'all would support the Shays Rebellion? Shays Rebellion was after the American Revolution. A bunch of farmers rose up against their government,
Mm-hmm.
protesting taxes. A bunch of
Mm-hmm.
people do it. How many of y'all support Whiskey Rebellion? Same thing. A bunch of white farmers rising up against their government.
Mm-hmm.
Support it. Then I'd ask them 1800, 6 years after the Whiskey Rebellion. How many of y'all support the Gabriel Prosser Rebellion, a slave rebellion? It's the same students that would support all rebellions because they thought it was the right and noble thing to do, fighting
Mm-hmm.
for the rights. They would not support a slave rebellion. And I would always have to ask, why?
Mm-hmm. And that triggers a memory of something that happens a lot. And I see it where you know how you say never forget 9/11,
Yeah,
right? But then when you know where I'm going with this, right?
that's how you do it.
Ah,
That's how you do it.
never forget 9/11. Okay, but
That's Socratic method.
why do you tell black people to get over slavery?
Yeah,
They're generations
yeah,
of lifetimes, generational wealth that they could have
yeah.
accumulated. So you don't want them to forget 400 years of slavery, but then you promote never forget 9/11. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, same thing with the Jews. They say never forget the Holocaust,
Yes,
and then they say never forget 9/11. But
yes,
I forgot.
yes,
So
yes.
that's exactly. You ask people. It's called Socratic method, and it's something that I've mastered.
I,
Whenever I
I
know
didn't
I'm
even
dealing.
know that had a name.
Yeah, yeah,
Socratic
yeah.
method.
Whenever you know you're dealing with a hostile political opponent that you already know they disagree with you on the issue, right? If the issue is a war, I don't support the war, he supports the war. How do I get him to to reveal that he really supports my position, but he doesn't even know it yet? And you
Yes.
ask him a series of questions. Are you Martin Luther King or are you Malcolm X? Do you support theft? Do you support robbery? Do you support this? Do you support that? Nah, 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 nah. Do you support Adolf Hitler? Do you support this, that? And then once you ask enough questions to where you know he doesn't support any of those things, then you ask, well, what is the difference between this and that? And that usually stumps them all the time.
I I have better luck on my group on LinkedIn with that than on Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook is a cesspool of like I don't even like and then there are those
But
people
it's
that
important because you're dealing with the general public, and the general public is are the ones that are your neighbor and here and there. The people that you come across the grocery stores are the people that are on the street. Like
there's certain people that to me are just too far gone, and you gotta I like no that
ignore.
there's a couple of them on my Facebook, and I never comment, but I always read their comments. I'm like you make no sense. Like you're like contradicting yourself every week. Like and you're clearly just on a team. You have loyalty to a team rather than loyalty to truth, and that's what a lot of people have. And when you're dealing with those people,
I have to have it open because I need to know what people are talking about so I can have these moments of conversations.
yeah.
So, what would you tell, so we can close, people that are fearful, because I see a lot of comments, if people are feeling very fearful, insecure, uncertain, in this moment in time. What would you tell them?
Well, if they're faithful people, I would say continue to pray. I would also tell them to just like you're doing, know your constitution, know your rights, um, deal with those things in the courts if you can, because that's another thing. We're getting our constitutional rights stripped away to the point where you don't even know if you can wait to the court date because
Yes.
they're like you might be detained indefinitely. But if there's a probable chance that you can have a court date, I would argue wait till don't like try to fight police officers and that kind of thing. Get yourself
Hmm.
killed, you know. But just know your rights, know the Constitution, and just teach that and spread that to the people around you, and pray. You know, it's I try not to live in fear, so I like to be more personally more proactive rather than reactive,
Hmm.
right? Reactive is you're making a decision based on what everybody else is already doing and
Hmm.
saying.
Hmm.
Proactive is you're already ready when the time comes, you know. So that's what I would say.
And any last words? You've been awfully quiet. You were supposed to be my wing woman.
Yeah, no, I think we covered a lot and we learned a lot for sure. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil and Angie, for coming and having this discussion. I hope everyone learned. We're going to have smaller snippets because people consume media. This is for YouTube, of course, the long form. We're gonna have little snippets on social media. Is there? I'm gonna ask you to share with me so I can tag you when all these snippets come out. That way, we can spread the word in 1 to 2 minute snippets, and people can consume it and learn something. So thank you so much, everyone, for having us. I hope that all of this was useful to you, not to live in fear. This has been repeated over and over again. We just have to persevere. We have to be resilient. We have to try to communicate with others and bring everything together. We may not agree in everything, but as long as we are together, which is a fight against a system, I think that we will be okay. And remember that you are not alone. There's a group of people that are fighting in the courts. There's a group of activists on the streets. We have 100-year-old organizations, nonprofit organizations that are for civil rights, like the ACLU, that fight at the courts that came from the civil rights movement.
Mm,
That wasn't that long ago in the 1960s. We have people living alive today from that time,
yeah.
and that they're back. They remember this, and they're back on the streets with courage and conviction. So I'll see you guys next time, and thank you so much. Do not hang up, guys. I'm just going to